Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
Intelligence,
voice recognition, machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Welcome to the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and I am here to help break down topics in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and voice assistant tech to help everyone understand how these technologies are impacting our lives both personally and within our organizations. The Artificial Podcast is brought to you by Red Fox AI. Red Fox AI helps give brands a voice by leveraging the power of AI and voice assistant technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant. If you or your organization is interested in sponsoring an episode, please send an email to the Artificial Podcast at redfox-ai.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you stream podcast episodes. You can also follow the Artificial Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for the Artificial Podcast. You can join our brand new Facebook group exclusively for listeners of the show, where you can meet other artificial podcasters from around the world who are interested in emerging technology just like you. A link to our Facebook group has been included in the episode notes. Thank you for listening, and now a quick word from our sponsors before we jump into this week's episode. Hey, Brett.
What's up, Nick?
You know, on the Artificial Podcast, we talk a lot about the future of conversational AI and voice assistant technologies, right?
So you mean basically in every episode we do?
All right, wise guy. But seriously, think about it. I don't think we truly realize how quickly voice assistants like Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, Cortana, and Bixby, just to name a few, have embedded themselves in our daily lives. I mean, the analysts are predicting that in a little more than 3 years, there will likely be 8 billion, yes, billion voice assistant users connected to nearly 2 billion global websites, more than 40 billion connected devices.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot. But what are you trying to get here, basically?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that for numbers like these to truly become a reality, a few things need to happen.
Yeah, like more technology innovations?
Well, yes, but I'm thinking of something more, something even more important. We need to have trust between the users and the technology itself.
Okay, yeah, I'll be honest. Sometimes I daydream about these voice assistants getting smart enough to rise up and take over like Skynet, from Terminator.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, that could happen, I suppose, but I'm talking about things like trustworthy privacy and trustworthy accessibility and trust that if you're a business, you have full rights to your name and your brand. Have you heard about the Open Voice Network?
No, I haven't. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
I would love to, Brett. Well, in a nutshell, the Open Voice Network is a non-profit directed fund of the Linux Foundation that is dedicated to making voice assistants worthy of user trust. Members of the Open Voice Network include conversational AI designers, strategists, developers, and other industry professionals from all around the world who are dedicated to paving the way for a future where voice can be trusted and benefits everyone. I'm proud to say that I've been a member since early this year, and it has truly been one of the best decisions I have made since becoming a voice practitioner. And if you're in the industry, I highly encourage you to check it out and join.
Sweet. That sounds cool. So what you're saying is Skynet isn't going to happen?
Oh, Brett.
If you are interested in learning more about the Open Voice Network and how you can get involved, visit www.openvoicenetwork.org or send an email to john.stein@openvoicenetwork.org. The Open Voice Network. Voice assistants worthy of user trust.
Hey there, artificial podcasters. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. This week, I am excited to welcome Michael Stanislawek to the Artificial Podcast. And Michael, if you're in the voice technology industry, is somebody that you've probably, at least over the last several months, may have had the pleasure of meeting on a, I'll put in air quotes, relatively small event called Voice Lunch, even though it's not that small anymore, and that's something Michael and I will talk about. But I've had some amazing discussions with Michael. He's doing some incredible work in the voice technology space and other areas, and I'm really excited to be able to have him on the show for you this week. But before Michael and I start chatting, let me tell you a bit more about Michael Stanislawek. Michael is the co-founder of Utter.One, a voice experience agency. Michael also co-founded and helps organize #VoiceLunch, which is a global initiative to bring the voice technology community closer together. He is also the head of product for Media Atmos, which delivers low latency broadcast quality live videos across the globe. Michael has almost 20 years of professional experience creating strategies and products for the internet and broadcast video sectors, as well as media asset management and workflow systems. In the early days of his career, he was involved in building developer communities for which he was recognized as an MVP by Microsoft. Recently, his focus has shifted to creating voice experiences and helping marketers develop strategies for the use of voice in business. Michael, welcome to the Artificial Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for the invitation.
And no, thank you for taking the time, because I know, again, you're so busy with everything you got going on. And I mean, just Voice Lunch alone, I can only imagine, again, the work that you and Carol put into that every week. And I can't wait to dive into that specifically with you, because as we were just talking about before we started recording here, the growth that this has seen over the last several months is truly incredible. So I'm really excited to be able to have a conversation here and dive into some of that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's kick things off, Michael. What has your journey been like so far working in, I guess, let's say the tech industry in general? And how did you ultimately wind up in voice through some of the experiences that you've had so far in your career?
So pretty much from the very beginning of my career, I've been working around the media industry, mostly with video, starting with internet video in the very early days, 2005, 2006. Back in the day, we were trying to build linear channels that were broadcasted over or just over the internet. There was a concept called narrowcasting. So we've been creating channels like the Horse TV or Whiskey TV for people to watch.
Love it.
And incredibly, there were a lot of people who are actually sitting back and watching the TV on the internet back then. And from there, I moved over to more of the broadcast industry and technology that sits behind all of the TV channels. Mostly around the media asset management, but also around the playout of those channels. And I've been working at the Deluxe Media Cloud, and we were the first to effectively create solutions that were allowing broadcasters to publish their channels directly from the cloud. Something that was kind of unique back in 2013.
Yeah.
We exhibited at NAB, which is like a big broadcast association show in Vegas, and back then some of our products actually won in innovation awards. It was quite interesting. But working with video and working with workflows, audio was always like really close to what I've been doing. And as within throughout my professional career, one of the shifts that I kind of missed was mobile. I didn't get in on it very quickly, and I didn't get in on it in depth. Which sort of haunted me a little bit. And when
you're not the first person to have said that I've met so far in the voice tech industry.
it's been crazy. I gotta tell you, I felt like I've missed something. And as soon as voice started becoming a thing, I remember I've been at reInvent in 2016, and one of the swag items that everybody got at the conference was the Echo Dot, and that was when I I don't want to say for the first time, but that's when I actually started looking into that technology much closer, much closer. And that's also around the time when I've met Carol, and Carol being another voice geek and another person who was really into podcasting and into voice. We started sort of cheering each other up into learning more and
That's
discovering
fantastic.
more. So it's been quite interesting. And over a year ago, in the beginning of 2019, all of that ended up as Utter.One. I've co-founded a company that does two things really. One thing, on one hand, we're an agency where we work with customers. On another hand, we're a bit of a studio because we've developed our own games as well. And the third side is developing an NLP component, that lets you browse through or search through big content archives. And this is something that comes from my previous experience. I've had to work with huge media archives, and I've seen throughout my professional career that there are so many of those archives that sit or lie there, not being used by people in any way. So it's a real shame. And with voice, you actually have now this interface that lets you say what you want to search for. And I thought that it would be a huge waste if we didn't try to do something with it. So we are. And that's one of the things that we're working on.
And that's completely, I remember you telling me about this shortly after we connected, after my first few voice lunch sessions. And I remember just being amazed when you told me the concept of it, because you think about how much media is currently sitting out there. Well, I mean, not only digitized, but just on the internet in general. I mean, even look at some of these documentaries that are made now that, they have all this old footage from, news segments from back in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, even all that has been digitized. So there's just so much out there. So I think it's so fascinating that you're working on a way for people to use voice to access media archives more efficiently. And I mean, if you think of YouTube, I mean, 100 years from now, what is YouTube going to evolve into, right? Like, is that just going to be the history of humanity because of all the videos? I mean, there's going to be so much, and there's going to need to be a really simplified way to access that info. So I think, again, what you're working on is fascinating, and I definitely want to chat about that in a bit here. But, with you, kind of working your way into the voice technology industry, you of course been able to also co-found something else here the last couple of months that has taken off quite significantly with Carol. So why don't you jump into what is the story behind Voice Lunch, and how did you and Carol come up with the idea, and what were your initial expectations when you launched this back in March, I believe it was, of this year?
Well, the story is actually quite interesting, and we didn't really come up with it. I don't really like to think about it this way, because all of it started with a tweet, and a tweet from Jan from Jovo, and when the pandemic started really hitting, and many countries were imposing restrictions. You had to stay home, and people were. I observed that people were searching for, online contact, and one of the things that Jan mentioned was like, let's meet up for lunch, and he's been doing these sort of one-on-one meetings back in the day. And I remember responding to his tweet saying, "Oh, let's do something bigger. I've got I think it was the Google Meet account. I've got a Meet account. Let's assemble more people and let's just have lunch together." And that's where it started.
I love it. I love how simple. I love it.
There was absolutely no planning, nothing of that nature. It was just simply, we got on this meeting, and as soon as it ended, together with Carol, we were like, we just can't let it go. We can't let it be one meeting. So, from there, we said, look, everyone's at home, right? The initial responses were like, this is great, and this gives us an opportunity to speak to other people. So we were like, okay, let's organize those meetings, and we started organizing them twice a week initially. On Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of shifted the hours a little bit to allow people from all around the world to join us. I believe the only sort of geographical region that had it really hard is Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and time zones close to that area. But apart from that, we've had people on Voice Lunch that were over 12 hours apart.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Which was crazy. And yeah, from there, it sort of went on, and we are now in a place where we have, I believe, 10 local Voice Lunches.
Wow.
Because in the meantime, some people started approaching us, and they were like, hey, maybe we can organize a local Voice Lunch in our language.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how it went on. And we never, I mean, it was never our intention to build the biggest meeting in the voice industry. I mean, we have no intention to build the tallest building, right? But we were thinking about it from a perspective like, how can we ensure that we can assemble and still have meaningful conversations without having too many people? And the first people that approached us were Martijn and Sam from the Netherlands. And that's how the Voice Lunch, the Dutch Voice Lunch started. And after that, we started thinking, and we started reaching out a little bit more to people and trying to see if there was any interest. Some other people approached us about the local Voice Lunches, and from there it all went. We now started like Voice Lunches that are not really regional, but they're topical. So Mike and Brielle are now leading and hosting the Voice Lunch Language and Linguistics, which is focused all around conversation building, linguistics, and language, and everything that has to do or has anything to do with the conversation design, which is great, and people really appreciate that particular one. And we sort of we then also, as the more regional Voice Lunches started appearing, we thought to ourselves, we don't want to cannibalize people's time, so we scaled down the global Voice Lunches to just once a week.
Yeah,
and that's how it is right now. That's how it is right now. It's working great. We're able to get some great people to come and join us with the discussion. I believe we've been able to like keep the same spirit, right? Anyone can join, anyone can raise their hand and have a voice, ask a question, throw in a discussion point, and that's what we really wanted. The intention was to build the same experience you would have if you were at a voice conference and you gathered around the lunch table and you just discussed voice. That's what the initial idea was, and I believe that until now, this is what we still have. And some of the lunches we now have in this formula of what we'd like to call 20 by 40, which is around 20 minutes of presentation by an expert or introduction into a topic, then followed by a 40 minutes of discussion. And this works quite great because we've tried to turn the webinar format upside down a little bit, have more of the Q&A and less of the presentation.
Right.
Because in a lot of cases people do know or have some knowledge around the topic that we're discussing anyway.
Right.
So it's more important to, discuss things. It's more important to, challenge
Oh yeah,
things.
absolutely. Well, that's incredible, and I think we were chatting before we started recording here. I remember hopping into my first voice lunch. I think it was midway through April, and I even think at that time it was maybe just 30, 40 people. And now, what is your average every Tuesday? It's like well over 100, right?
No, I think we're getting like up to 90 people.
Close enough.
Yes, but again, everyone is welcome, right? We will welcome. We are welcoming everyone. So we'll be happy to host over 100 people.
Yeah. Well, and you partnered with Voice Global too, and I remember you had that awesome session with the his name was Brian, right? I think he was
yes.
He's I forgot how he described it. He's an astronaut, but not one that goes to space, or he's an astronaut candidate or something like that.
He's a commercial
Yep.
astronaut candidate.
Yeah, that was fascinating. And the fact that you were able to get somebody, into Voice Lunch like that is just a testament to the impact of it in general. I know you had Brian Romley on a couple of weeks ago, and I can only imagine some of the folks that you probably plan to get in the future. But that's the impact of it, right? It's literally is giving access to so many different people to some really interesting folks to have discussion and share ideas. And I think that is definitely something that we're all kind of migrating towards more in this world with everything going on, right? It's that ability to converse with other people, share open dialogue and different things just because of all the different things that are happening right now. It's like we're craving that. So I think the platform that you and Carol build here, as I've told you, Michal, from day one, it's incredible, and it's so cool to see how much it has grown and all the different spin-offs. I mean, I see when you guys you send out the weekly email and you announce some of the different countries and cities that are having these, and I'm like, Israel, I think there was one was it Greenland or was it Iceland?
No, we've got Israel, we've got Japan, we've got Brazil, we've got Spanish, obviously.
Gotcha.
There's a new one in the UK as well, which has been taking off as well. And yeah, I'm joining. I obviously can't join all of them because of the language barrier, and I obviously don't speak all of the languages, but I try to join as many as I can. And I got to tell you that, joining the UK one recently was a great experience. It was a very small meeting with people where everyone, had a say and everyone could raise their voice, and we didn't have to raise hands and go through all of that formalized, moderation procedure. So
right.
It was really awesome. It sort of took me back to the very early days of Voice Lunch, and it's it's still available. It's still there. All you got to do is join one of the local ones.
Well, absolutely. And to anyone listening to what Michal said earlier, it's completely open. So if you're somebody listening who is working in voice tech, or even if you're not in voice tech but want to learn more about this technology, the industry, and meet some incredible folks in it, I mean, I really encourage you to check one out, because I think you'll get hooked, much like a lot of other people have. And it'll just help accelerate your knowledge in this so much. So with that being said, Michal, what have been some of your favorite Voice Lunch sessions to date? And in conjunction with that, what have been some of your most memorable pieces of feedback that you received?
So probably the one that I remember the most is the one with the astronaut, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely the one, because I remember when we were discussing this with Carol, and I said, look, Carol, this would be great, but I'm really worried that, we won't be able to get anyone there. And, maybe, we're going to be going into the area where we will have to, rather than talk about facts, sort of, use our imagination a little bit. But Carol was like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to get an astronaut. We're going to get somebody from NASA, SpaceX, or somewhere, And I got to tell you that he went above and beyond, trying to search people. And in the end, we were able to get Brian to agree to talk to us. And the talk that he gave was absolutely fabulous.
Oh, it was amazing.
It showed me that, there are so many possibilities for the voice interface to find a natural, really good place to be used. Because when we talked about the spaceship, right? It's a noisy environment. So the more you think about it, the less likely it is that there's any like real world use for a voice interface over there. But Brian pointed us at the spacesuit,
right?
And as soon as he said that, there was like this light bulb moment in my head when I went like, damn, like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When your hands are occupied, you're in this spacesuit that is heavy, and it's really not easy to move around in it. It would be great if you can give voice commands, for example. So yeah, that was a real, I don't want to say an eye opener, but something that sort of made me change the way I think about the possibilities a little bit and open up even more. And I'm usually a guy that is really enthusiastic about where we can use voice. So it really made an impact on me.
Yeah, and I remember that session too, and he did a really good job of kind of showing, I thought, where voice could fit in and maybe like where the challenges would be. But in conjunction with that, he also just explained the spaceship and the process of going to space and what it would be like up in the ISS. I mean, all these different supplementary parts to the main topic he just went in. That was it was just so well done. And I'm with you. Space has always just fascinated me. And just the concept of, God, if we can ever get to the point where it can become cheap enough to where we can just send people up in space elevators to the moon or Mars, right? But like, I thought he also did an insanely well job, and that's one that stands out to me too, because it's just such a different topic and a different, I'll go ahead and say industry. There is an industry of space that so many people don't know about, and because it almost kind of seems like it's in this black box, but bringing him on a voice lunch was able, I think, to open that box a bit and show what the possibilities could be, and just educate people more on just space travel and what it takes to actually be an astronaut. I found the entire thing incredible, so I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and me, one of my favorite movies of all time, I would say, is Space Odyssey.
Yes.
So it was like a full circle for me. Talking to Brian and listening to his presentation back then. And in terms of the feedback that we got, actually the first really memorable feedback is my feedback. And I had that after a couple of voice lunches where I said to Carol, is like, I've met more people over the last couple of voice lunches right in the middle of the pandemic when we're locked out and we cannot go and see other people. I've met more voice people than I have since the last voice conference. It was all about voice or something back then.
And that's saying something for sure.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I like when we started it, we thought like we're gonna meet, some people this week, some other people that week, and we're just gonna keep it going until it naturally dies off and people are no longer interested, and maybe they have, can go out and it's not really needed for anyone. And yeah, it's been crazy how many new faces I've also managed to see and learn so many fascinating histories. And it's gonna be really weirdly pleasant to meet all of those people in person. Like,
right.
I can't imagine the moment, like the next like voice conference where after all the pandemic has ended, right? And people are no longer worried to travel.
Right.
And there is an international voice conference and we then meet in real life. It's going to be crazy.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the beautiful thing about this too, is because you're getting to know everybody so well over the virtual channel that, it's like when you finally see them in person, it's like, no friction whatsoever. It's like you're just running into an old friend.
Exactly.
I've had those experiences, quite often the last few years, talking with people in Australia, Asia, and different places. And I think that's why, to Michael, this is so valuable, because you're making friends every time you go into one of these voice lunch sessions. You're making friends, you're meeting new people. So when you do finally meet them in real life, it's just so natural, and it's fascinating and amazing, and I love it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And that's what we've been hearing as well, is like the best feedback that I've ever heard from like someone who was not me, was that it really helped them throughout the pandemic. And it was really a place that they were looking forward to joining, and that it made a real like a real change in the way they've been approaching the pandemic. They've been approaching their work and everything. It's been really powerful. I mean, I've got goosebumps when I talk to you about this right now as well. And well, the other thing is that this community has turned out to be so lovely. I mean, there are so many really talented people.
Yes.
People who are so willing to share their knowledge, who are so willing to help each other. It's just crazy. And the other memorable, like there's another memorable moment. I think it was one of the voice lunches where we didn't have any specific topic. We were just like, let's just have lunch. Let's talk about anything. Let's talk about voice lunch and everything else. And like close to the end of the voice lunch, somebody asked, well, like we started talking about the imposter syndrome, and somebody asked the questions like, who here ever felt the imposter syndrome? Like, raise your hands.
Did everybody raise their hand?
Pretty much.
That's quite comforting. In an odd way.
Yes, it is. It was. But it was such a powerful moment as well. It's like a lot, and like a lot of these people are experts in voice, like true experts in their field. And it's been like, for me, it's been powerful as well, because I think I've always had the imposter syndrome. I never think that, I'm always wondering why when you asked me to join this podcast, I was like, me? Why me?
Because you're incredible, Michael. That's why.
I know. That's the thing. But I did it, and I'm doing it, and I like, this helps me to realize that there are things that I can talk about that other people might find interesting, and hopefully a bunch of them will find this interesting.
Absolutely. And to your point about the whole imposter syndrome thing, I'm right there with you. I mean, anybody could go and talk to our CTO, who is also my best friend, and if he had a nickel for every time I mention him every week, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, or I don't feel like I'm quote unquote worthy to be in this industry because I'm not as knowledgeable as other people. And again, that's just the negative self-talk, right? I mean, he'd probably be a millionaire, let's be real. So I'm right there with you that, and a big issue that, again, has been more personal for me is, even going to voice lunch and a lot of other meetings, I'm one of the youngest people in this industry too. I'm noticing, the more meetings I go to, which is fine, but that kind of plays into the issue I've had. I'm like, man, I'm so young in this. I have nowhere near as much experience as these other folks. And, do I really know what I'm talking about? But, to hear you say that somebody actually asked that in a voice lunch and everybody almost raised their hand, again, is oddly comforting. And that actually makes me feel comfortable even in this moment now, knowing that.
Yeah. And it's also an industry that is forming out of a great mix of people. And, even if you look at the age, right, you've got a great mix of people who have a lot of experience, and people who are just joining, but people who are really into it and who are spending their time learning about it, experimenting with it, and actually bringing value to people who have years of experience. So it's a great mix.
It really is. So having heard so many different perspectives now over the last few months running Voice Lunch, what are some predictions that you have for voice technology, let's say, over the next 5 years? Do you think it will still be primarily the large platforms as we see it today? Or do you think there will be an entirely new ecosystem, let's say, of third-party voice assistants solving problems for specific industries? What are your thoughts on the future of this industry?
Well, I'm a great believer in the one assistant paradigm that Adam Chire has been talking about. I believe that people are going to finally, like end users, will finally start thinking about the voice technology. Like they're not going to think about it; they're just going to use it because it's going to be so ambient. And for that to happen, people need to be able to use the voice interface pretty much anywhere. And that means that you can't have two voice assistants, at least in my mind. And we've had some examples at Voice Lunch. We've had Wunder, an app, a voice assistant built completely from scratch, together with hardware for parents to help them raising kids effectively. And I think more and more we're going to see this happening because I think that there are certain situations where you'll ask your car to do something for you, but then on the other hand there are other things that you'll ask your fridge to do for you, and then you'll ask the assistant on your computer to do something else. So I believe that people will eventually get comfortable with the big platforms to a point that they will start expecting that everyday objects actually do have voice interfaces.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be so crucial to have one wake word, for example. So not everything will have to be Alexa or Google or Bixby. I think it's going to be much more ambient, and I really hope that it will. There's definitely some signs of more and more custom assistants being built by big brands here, there, and everywhere. I mean, you've got T-Mobile in Germany, you've got the BBC working on Beeb,
right,
and so many other examples. I think it's going to spread. And also, it's going to be super interesting over the next 5 years because we're such a young industry. Is that so many things are going to change? We've had this voice lunch. Like last voice lunch was about tools, and I hope that we're gonna hear about tools that are widely used by people in this industry. And I got to tell you that I learned so many new tools that maybe not that I haven't heard about, but I haven't necessarily considered be tools to be used in this context, but also, a lot of that I haven't heard about. And I believe that, a lot of them will come and go, especially when you think about the no-code approach. This is another thing that I'm kind of enthusiastic about because, we definitely have a shortage of developers, and there are definitely, certain things that just don't have to be done by a developer. They can be done by a business analyst or somebody who has, some domain knowledge and is technical enough to be able to sort of convert it into sequences, because in a lot of cases that's going to be enough. But then on the other hand, you're going to have those no-code platforms, coming and going. And, as we talked a little bit beforehand, in those cases, you are at the mercy of the platforms. So I think that the landscape is going to be shifting like crazy over the next 5 years. And, predicting anything specific right now would be like pulling your finger up in the air.
Right, it's like trying to throw a dart at a darper with a blindfold on.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting for those of us who are so ingrained in the technology and the industry. Like, it doesn't feel like it's so new, but the moment you get out of the industry and talk to anybody else, it's like, wow, we're still in like the internet of 1995 right now, maybe even a bit earlier. It feels like that.
Yes, it does. The only difference is that, back then, it was so much easier. Right now, we've
Yeah.
got an abundance of technology. We are literally standing on the shoulders of giants that provide so much, technology in so many different areas that all you have to do is just pick and use as building blocks. It's just crazy. And I think that's the main difference between now and what we had back then. I still remember building like websites back in, must have been like 95 or something. And it was super interesting to be doing that in just a text editor and seeing the result, be presented on another computer somewhere across the classroom. I was back at high school then. It was just crazy. And you got to remember it was still the DOS days and Windows 3.1. Networking was just it was just the beginning of any of that.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. That there definitely is a much different landscape with some of these newer emerging technologies, voice, AI, blockchain, because it's being built on top of, technologies have already been there for a handful of years. And, you consider the internet, and there was personal computing, and, you had, that whole scene, of course, was pretty solidified since the early 1980s. But now it's a completely different landscape, because the green space that was with the internet, I mean, there's still green space with voice and AI and some of these newer technologies, but it's, what I'm trying to get at here? Yep. Like it's, what words am I looking for? Maybe it's more directed. The internet was not directed in the early days, right? It was just this big empty canvas that nobody knew what to do with, that ultimately led to the creation of some of the world's largest tech companies. Whereas, the same thing can happen with AI and voice potentially, but it's more directed because the canvas has been filled in a bit over the last, 25 years with the internet. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, one of the things that so excites me of voice is that we are not even scratching the surface of what will be possible in 5 years.
Yeah.
Right now. Like, I really think that. And, I think it even goes beyond my imagination of what might happen with the speed that things are being developed right now, with the speed of the new AI models for language processing are being, introduced.
Well, I mean, it's Moore's law, right? Technology is just going to get more efficient, cheaper, and more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think a lot of the points you made there definitely, like you said, it's hard to predict anything right now because it's still so early and every single part of this is just moving so rapidly. But I definitely agree with you. I think as the technology improves, as people become more accustomed to using it with smartphones and computers, there will be an expectation to have it in everything. I'm with you. I've always kind of had this crazy vision since getting in this industry where every home is just built with, albeit to a lot of folks who may not want this, but I just foresee microphones in the walls that you can just talk to and accomplish things and help you schedule appointments, send your car off to get an oil change, automatically schedule you flight information, reorder groceries that the drones drop off in a box at your front. You know what I mean? All of that.
Yeah. And the only difference is they won't be in your walls, but they will be in your microwave. They probably already are in your fridge, in your other everyday items. And on top of that, you're going to have an Alexa or Google Home or something else, or the Nest thermostat that probably at some point is going to have microphones built in as well.
Right. Yeah, it's a really fascinating industry, and definitely those who are consistent listeners know that it's definitely a fun place to be in now, but it still is super early, and that's something I think we all have to be cognizant of as well. So as we kind of talk about voice, let's quickly dive into what are you currently working on at Utter.One. I want to touch quickly on that component you're talking about with being able to access media archives with voice. I don't know if you can dive into that just a bit, because that absolutely fascinated me from the first time you told me about that.
Sure, I'll probably use an example to explain what we're working on. One of the prototypes that we've built is sitting on top of a huge media archive of podcasts, of videos, YouTube videos. And what we've done is, for everything that didn't have a transcript, we created a transcript, which is something that you can pretty easily do with the services off the shelf at the moment. And we've built our component to allow seamless search, but seamless search in such a way that gives you a bit of a contextual search. So it's not the full text search as you would know it, because what we're trying to do and what we're doing is we're processing the entire content converted into a text form of the archive, and then letting you search for the most contextually applicable solution. And we retain the metadata together with it, which means that, if you're searching for a particular keyword or a phrase, we will be able not only to direct you to a piece of content, but we will be able to direct you to the particular part in the video or the podcast where that thing you were asking for was being spoken about. So that's one of the things that we're doing. We've also been working a little bit to extend this concept with recommendations, because search is great, but it's really one-dimensional, and in a lot of cases you might not necessarily find, or you might not be specific enough to find the right piece of content. So one of the things that we're also working on is we're trying to add recommendation elements in either a way to allow you to specify more contextually of what you are searching for, or have the assistant actually ask follow-up questions in order to allow you to be more specific about what you're searching for. So that's what we think can have applications in much more than just media archives, because you can think about product archives, and you can think about people trying to search the right thing for them by describing what they're trying to search for. And then if we have a way of actually allowing them to be more specific, and at the same time we have a way to sort of ask them to be more specific by asking the right questions, that's when it becomes really, really powerful.
Yeah, that my gears are spinning so much just from the value add of what you're building there. Because if you think about it now, whether you're using voice or not, when there's stats out there where YouTube is the second largest search engine, right? And you try to go find an instructional video, or it can really be anything. You get videos, but because of the text-based keyword search, you may get clickbait, you may not get clickbait. And then if you do click on something that is clickbait, you then have to sit there for however long the video is and try and figure out, is the video actually talking about what I want? And if it is, you have to get to that specific part. And most people don't want to sit through a 15-minute video to get a 1 to 3 minute piece of information that they probably need. So of course, the moment you brought this up to me, that is exactly what I thought about, because that is such a huge issue when you're trying to access, media archives, now whether it be in YouTube or another service, the time it takes to actually sift through that video to get the information needed. And it may not have it because of how current keyword search works. That is just, I can't even, place the value on that, because it's going to change everything, especially integrating the voice part of it too.
Yeah. And that's what, that's where it all started. And it started with like, how can we put a voice interface on top of it? And if you then you immediately start thinking about how do you search through it, and then it turns out the current existing solutions are not really even close to be good enough, because in most cases you're gonna get something that is really not all that relevant to what you're searching for. So
right. And even using like with my Google Nest Hub, I use, of course, Google Assistant on there to play videos and different things, but it still doesn't have the context, right? It still just pulls up the top video that matches the keyword search most accurately. And that's why, I think you and I, again, before we started recording, we're talking about the whole issue of context. Is probably, I would say, if not the largest, one of the largest issues that voice technology faces right now is it's not contextual. And I think the moment that it does become contextual is when the true boom of this is going to happen. I'm a firm believer of that. And what you're working on here, I think is one of the things that may allow that to actually happen. I mean, I would love to be able to just ask, whatever voice assistant it may be, show me a video on this that explains how to do this. And it goes right to that timestamp. I mean, that would just be incredible. And I know I'm not the only one who would probably say that.
Yeah, but it goes further than that, because one of the things that we discussed at Voice Lunch UK this week was discoverability, and that's a topic that if you're in the voice space,
right, it's
you've
everywhere.
You've heard about it, you've talked about it, about it, and one of the things that really bothers me, right, is this concept of the marketplace. Both for Google Assistant and the skill store for Alexa, they are so old-fashioned. Like, even forgetting the fact that it's really cumbersome and hard to find anything within them. You are creating a marketplace for this voice interface, and yet here I am, and I can't say I want to play a game that does this, that, or the other.
Yes.
That's just like, why?
Yeah.
And that's the expectation that I would have as a consumer when I buy this smart speaker, which is supposedly smart, right?
Right.
I would like to ask it to give me a game about this, that, and the other.
And then it just serves it up to you instead of you having to, research the specific, invocation name or the specific name of the, the skill or action or whatever it may be. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
I imagine how it will affect discoverability. And obviously, discoverability is your responsibility as a voice creator, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously. And you got to deliver the value. You got to make sure it's useful for people and it solves a problem and it brings value in some way. But right now, it's really, really hard.
Right.
If you look, because Rich Merritt, the Echo Dad, he brought it up from the user perspective. Like, from the user perspective, it's really hard to find something good. And even if you search for it, then you have to enable it, then you have to try it.
Right.
And it's still hard. I mean, one of the concepts that was that actually was born during the Voice Lunch was the concept of 30-second previews. And right now, I think it's been submitted by Tom Hewitson to the Alexa user voice, and it's one of the things you'll be able to vote on if it's accepted.
I would like to vote on that.
It's all on Twitter, by the way. Like, Twitter is probably the place that most of the discussions end up after the voice lunches. But yeah, I mean, it's so weird that we as voice creators, people in voice, don't look at things often enough from the user perspective.
Yeah.
From like the end user perspective.
I would agree. And it's, again, one of those things where I think, a lot of us are so passionate about what we do, and we think we're creating the greatest thing we possibly can for our user, but I think it's one of the things where the user is still so new to all of it. Mm-hmm. It's more focused, and emphasis needs to be placed on what exactly does this person expect out of this? What do they want? And what we've found is right now as simple as it can possibly be.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because everybody, what are the most common things that people are doing with voice assistants now? Asking to play music, setting timers, asking basic questions. It's nothing advanced yet. And I think, it's good to create advanced stuff, but it still has to be framed to, because of some of the limitations of the platforms and the technology, which again, I really hope, to a lot of the things you've said, we overcome in the next 5 years, especially the piece of context is that's what people I think are still expecting right now is they want something that's easy to use, something that understands them and helps them shave time off something. That's at least what I've settled on. And I could be, of course, very wrong with that thinking, but that's what we've kind of discovered, at least for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Well, with that in mind, Michael, as we start to wind our conversation down here, I always like to end on this question, of course. What is one thing that you think someone can do today to begin leveraging voice technology, of course, in the context of our discussion, either personally or within their organization?
I think my advice would be to just start.
Mm-hmm.
Just start, doing something, learning, educating yourself about voice, about how it works. It's crucial that, we as people who are really, the first ones to truly like start using this medium or this modality in such a way, it's important that we understand how it works. And coming back to what I've mentioned earlier about, me creating the web pages,
Mm-hmm.
Notepad back in '95, it was something that really helped me understand how web works. So definitely my advice would be to start, learn, educate yourself, and start doing something really simple. As you said, simplicity here is the key. We need to, and if we're thinking, or if you are looking at it from the perspective of a brand, if you are a marketer, for example, you have to think about creating really simple experiences for your customers, for people who might be searching for your brand via this medium or via the smart speakers, and bringing something of value to them, but in a really, really simple way. That's, by the way, that's one of the ways how I know that somebody is really new to voice.
Yeah.
Is when they come in and say, "Oh, I want to do something that does this, that, and the other, and something else," and we're gonna. And it's like, yeah, you're new, right?
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yep, you're right on the money with that one for sure.
So yeah, start simple, but definitely educate yourself and start doing something.
Yes, I that's fantastic advice. I think your perspective is on point there, and with a technology like this, it's very easy to get caught up in the possibilities and building these big gargantuan things, or even it just feeling like, again, it's in this black box that you can't access. But, it's like we often talk a lot about on this show, the information's out there. And you can do so many simple things with it right now just to get your feet in the water. And experiment and it's a phased in scale up approach, right? Like you start with something very basic. If that works, then maybe you can add on to it here, and you keep scaling up, and the technology right now does allow you to do that, albeit it is still lacking in some areas and has some limitations, but you really can create some really solid simple things, and it all begins with just learning and jumping into it. So yeah, Michael, I agree with that 100%. But, thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with me here. I had a blast. And of course, just getting to talk about everything with Voice Lunch and, some of the really neat things that you're working on is just so valuable. So I appreciate that. And if anybody wanted to get in touch with you or reach out to you, what are some of the best ways for them to go about doing so?
Best way is to always catch me on Twitter at xmstan, or just drop me a mail at Michal at Utter.One.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. And of course, I'm very much looking forward to continuing to collaborate and hopefully start jumping back into some more voice lunch meetings here. We're in a really exciting time in this industry, and I'm so happy that I personally get to work alongside people like yourself. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you.
My pleasure again as well. Thanks. We'll chat soon.
Thank you.
Artificial
Intelligence.
voice recognition, machine learning.
Robotics.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host, Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.